Hola amigos de Wine News TV Puerto Rico, me encuentro en el Hórreo de Suárez y hoy vamos a hablar con la bodega más importante de Australia, una de las más importantes del mundo, Penfolds. Primera vez que la tenemos en pantalla, luego de más de 175 entrevistas, se me da. Penfolds es una marca muy conocida en Puerto Rico, en el mundo, muy querida, por supuesto traída de los amigos de el Hórreo de Suárez, la familia de Suárez. Tenemos en el canal hoy en la entrevista a Zoe Warrington.
Correct.
How are you? So good to have you on the program.
Lovely to be
Amazing.
here.
So, before we get into the wines, we have 3 wines to try. We have creme de la creme. We have beautiful wines. So they're treating me well. I cannot complain.
Yeah, it's a tough job to go around the world and taste these wines.
So what we do is communicate the wine culture in Puerto Rico. Before we get into the company and the wines, I would just want to express my support. I know Australia has been in the public eye because of the fires. I know it's been a situation that has caused a lot of concern for a lot of us. So just want to express my deep, sympathy and empathy for our brothers and sisters in Australia. I know they've been through a rough patch. So you want to touch on that?
I guess I would like to say grazie.
Okay.
For that.
Sure.
It has been it's been a tough time for us, the end of last year and obviously the beginning of 2020 in terms of what we call our bushfire season. Yeah. So it's something that we do every year.
So this happens every year, and this time has been worse than other years.
Yeah, it does. I mean, Australia is essentially, we are a big desert. So we are bushfire ready, if you can call it that, every year. But aside from that, where this was a very unprecedented natural disaster. We're not used to having the scale of bushfire that we did. So rapidly as what we did at the end of last year.
You guys had a rough start. We also did here in Puerto Rico. We had a bunch of earthquakes at the beginning of the year.
I know, I did hear that.
So it's been sort of a similar start to 2020.
I think Mother Nature is not very happy with us in some respects. But aside from that, we have had lots of rain. I've been away from Australia for 2.5 weeks now.
Okay.
So we were still dealing with a lot of the bushfires when I left, but the information that I have on hand now is all of the fires are under control.
Congratulations, that's great.
Which is amazing.
So good to hear. So I know you got a bunch of people who want to meet you and try the wines with you. Let's get into Penfolds. Penfolds is a huge name. Let's assume that I'm a guest at your place and you're going to explain to me in 2-3 minutes what Penfolds is all about. Go ahead. It's complicated, right?
That is, that's a challenge in itself.
That's how we roll.
If I was to say that, I would say Penfolds. Penfolds has been around for 175 years.
Wow.
Which is incredible for Australian wines, not only for the Penfolds name, but if I think back to when we were first founded, which was 1844 in South Australia. If I was to look to the original origins of settlement, European and British settlement in Australia, it was 51 years prior to Penfolds arriving in Australia. So we really are a pinnacle of Australian wine. These 3 wines here.
Pardon my ignorance. Why the name Penfolds? Is it a last name of a family?
Yeah, absolutely. So Penfold is the name of Dr. Penfold.
Okay.
So a young English doctor who came out to Australia from England with the intent of making medicinal wine that he could administer as a tonic to his patients.
Interesting.
So with that said, a lot of our philosophies were steeped in fortified wines. So port styles, sherries, brandies, and it wasn't until our first creation of our flagship wine, Grange, in 1951, so nearly over a century on from our first styles of wine, that we became the global, you guys are an icon. The global pinnacle of Australian wine.
You're definitely, without a doubt, the most famous and
Australian
without a doubt, Australian wine,
Correct.
Australian brand, and top quality. I mean,
I will do my best to explain this in a very short space of time. 175 years to cram into a small space of time is a hard feat, but I think outside of anything, our history, these wines, where these wines all sit in a global perspective, will speak for itself.
Exactly.
More than I can speak
How
for
many
it.
wines do you produce? 20, 25 labels, different ones?
If you were to take into consideration where we started, which is fortified wines, so port styles, we have just released a brandy as well. So going back to our heritage, the bin range, so the bin number wines, and then our icon and luxuries, I would say it would be around about the 35 to 40
it's a lot of labels.
different wines.
Of course.
However, as I said, we've spent 175 years of perfecting these wines. So these wines will, more often than not, speak to personality
Yeah.
and a style, rather than some of the old world wines where they speak to a vintage. So consumers like yourself.
I'm a consumer, and
Yeah.
this program is for consumers.
I am
I'm
too.
not a winemaker. I'm just not a collector, a consumer.
No, but even if you are a collector, these wines speak to people on a level where they can be confident to go and buy these wines every year. You'll still get that vintage variation. We've got a couple of different vintages here, and I think, these will speak to a vintage, but they'll also speak to a personality. So you will be friends with a person because of they're a really funny person, or they might be a really knowledgeable person.
So they express the vintage, and that's bottled.
They express the vintage, but they also express their personality.
That's good.
I
Good
dress
to know.
in black, a black shirt and blue jeans every day. That's my personality.
Yeah, I
So
also wear
these-
black all the time.
Yeah, so it's the same kind of
All
thing.
right, I know you got a lot of people waiting
Yeah,
for
I
you.
do.
Let's dive into the wines. The first one, we got the Bin 389. What
Yes.
can you tell me about this one?
So the bin 389, it
Cheers.
goes right back. Cheers. It goes right back to our heritage. It was one of the first wines to be released after Grange in 1960.
Okay.
So it's been in the portfolio for a long time. And if I was to probably describe it in a 30-second brief, I would say it's a great example of a quintessential Australian blend. Australia was the first to blend Cabernet and Shiraz together as varietals, which is now the benchmark for Australian blends. This particular vintage, the 2017, is 54% Cabernet, and the remainder is Shiraz. So you're always looking at just that little...
I love the freshness, the mint. There's a lot of
Yeah.
menthol coming up, the blackberry.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, I think if you think of where we source in South Australia, so all of our red fruit comes from South Australia. So you're looking at very generous fruit flavors,
Yeah.
but you're also looking at that complexity of multi-region, multi-vineyard sourcing. So you get those warm fruits in there, you get cool fruits.
But it's not hot. I mean,
No.
it's gracious, it's silky, and it's only 14.5. With this nose, other wines are 16%, and they're like
Correct.
chocolate shakes.
Do you know what? It's
There's
actually
balance.
that's an interesting thing, because we had a beautiful Chardonnay at lunch today, and the Chardonnay was 14.5%. And I turned around and I said, that's what our red wines sit at, and
Yeah.
we are in the middle of a desert.
Yeah.
14.5 is such a beautiful, I think compared to even 70 years ago.
Yeah. It's so much.
It's a great
Love this wine.
alcohol level. You're not getting too hot. It's a beautiful wine, and I think when you try this wine, you've got beautiful balance of fruit, sweetness.
What would you pair this with? Let's say that a friend calls you and says, Zoe, I'm going to open a 389. What should I cook?
Well, our reds do pair very beautifully with red meat, obviously. But if and I'm probably I'm a very un-Australian Australian in the fact
Are
that...
you a vegetarian?
No, I'm not a vegetarian. However, I don't eat lamb,
Okay.
which is, everyone loves to have lamb.
With Shiraz.
I would, to be honest, I think the Cabernet Shiraz, a bin 389, lamb of any kind. If you want to put lamb on the barbecue, or if you want to put it on a spit,
And then you can throw some herbs, rosemary.
Of
There's lots of
course.
herbs here happening.
But it doesn't have to be lamb. You can have red meat with this, and even if you are a vegetarian, you can still do some
Charred veggies, like on the char. Yeah.
or even beans. You could do a chili, a vegetarian version of chili. So you just those
the
spices,
spice and the hotness. will
You
really
just-
maximize the wine and
Correct.
vice
You
versa.
just need something that just has a bit of body, whether it be a food. You need the food to have some body and some spice to be able to hold up to the wine. So it doesn't necessarily need meat. However, our wines do lend themselves to meat. Now that's probably a good segue into the next wine.
It is, and let's get into this one. Obviously,
This is a great wine.
This is an amazing wine, and I think was the number 9 wine, the top
Wine
100 Wine
Spectator.
Spectator.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And this is a trial. Tell me about this project.
Well, it was a trial. So if I go back to 1997, which is the first vintage of this wine, this is the 2017 that we are trying today. So it is the 20th anniversary of this wine. However, RWT stands for Red Wine Making Trial. So nothing too exciting, inventive. And it was a trial wine to be a point of difference to our flagship, which is Grange. So Grange is a multi-region Shiraz matured in American oak. This is a single region matured in French oak.
What an amazing wine. I mean, it's so layered.
It's beautiful.
It's layered. It's very silky. And
It's
you got
feminine.
the acidity. And so the nose is haunting, it's intoxicating. It's lovely.
It's a really lovely thing that you say that, because our winemakers generally tend to pick fruit for RWT.
Yeah.
On
It's a
its
sexy
merits,
wine.
On its merits.
It's Jennifer
of
Lopez.
highly-
It's J-Lo. I think the RWT is
she
J-Lo.
did a great performance last night as well in the Super Bowl.
It's very fresh in my mind.
We pick it on its merits of highly perfumed fruit, intensity. So to me, I think this is a great example of Barossa Valley Shiraz.
And it's only 14.5, and it's so
Exactly.
dense, concentrated, rich.
Blue
Got bitter
fruits.
chocolate, blue
Yeah.
fruit,
Blue fruits, black fruits,
a little bit of
coffee.
coffee. Exactly, we said it at the same
Mocha.
time.
Mocha.
Yeah.
This
the
was
vanilla,
not.
yeah.
This was not
It was
staged.
not rehearsed. Yeah.
Seriously, it was not. It
Oh
is.
my God! I
it is
love this wine.
It is a beautiful wine.
Yeah.
French oak, I think, gives it that lovely.
This is 100%
tannin-
Shiraz.
100% Shiraz.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. 100% Shiraz. 100% Barossa Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting that lovely. I guess if you were to talk about terroir, which Australian wine is not necessarily associated with terroir like the old world is, this is a great example of what Barossa Valley
about terroir,
gives
man.
you. This gives you that beautiful, intense blue and black fruits.
I love
it gives
the
you coffee.
freshness paired with intensity, because sometimes, and you know that for a while, not you guys, but other Australian
Yeah.
brands were sort of bad-mouthed because of the ripeness and the sugar and the level, but the tension here and the power. I always have this saying that certain wines that combine power and elegance are like Shaquille O'Neal on high heels, right? So you got a monster
That's
here.
the sight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people make fun of me when I say that, but this is a big guy, but so elegant,
Yeah.
so gracious.
100%. I agree with you.
You like Shaq on high heels?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've never seen him in high heels, but I'll be the first to say that I would love to see that.
All right.
Which I think
Let's
you
go
should as
to
well.
the wine that they probably serve in heaven, Penfolds Grange. What can you tell me about this one?
So this is our flagship wine today. However, it was not a style that we started out making. So Penfolds has been around for 175 years in Australia, so very early times. This wine came around over a century on, I guess. 1951 was the first time that we actually produced this wine. And it came about from our first chief winemaker.
Is this the one that used to be called Hermitage before?
It used to be called Grange, so it used to be labelled Grange Hermitage.
Exactly.
And that was just because in Australia we were New World, but a lot of our styles, even
French.
before Chardonnay came into the mix of it,
Was wrong.
we would refer to white wines as Chablis
Exactly,
if it had
Brendan.
high acidity and it was citrus in flavour. It may not have been Chardonnay at the time.
Yeah. Similar in California.
It's
They
same,
used to-
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So Hermitage for us actually just related to the varietal that we used.
And
then
Grange,
in
what does Grange mean?
So Grange actually refers to the homestead. So Dr. Penfold and Mary Penfold, our founders, came over from England and they purchased a property which now sits 8 kilometres outside of the city centre of South Australia, Adelaide. And they purchased a property which was 500 acres in size, and they built a home. So their home that they lived in was in the middle of the vineyard, and they called it the Grange, which related
Beautiful.
to Mary's family home in England.
Okay.
So it was just a
An homage. An homage.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Okay, let's give it a. I mean, I have no words to describe. This is perfection. I mean, like, it's.
It is a beautiful wine. It is.
I don't even want to taste it. I mean, I don't want to taste it
Come on,
because I
let's
know
taste it together.
it'll go away.
Cheers.
But this is not even wine. I mean, this is poetry. This is like drinking the Roman Colosseum. This is, oh my God.
So in a very short space of time, if I can say that Grange was actually modelled off of Bordeaux. So our first chief winemaker, Max Schubert, who created all of these wines.
And the bottles are dedicated to him, right?
They
It's an
are.
homage,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had a couple of Grange
So
in the past.
he worked the 1950 vintage in Bordeaux to look at creating an Australian table wine that would be comparable to those of Europe and capable of staying alive for 20 years. This is where Grange came about. Obviously, varietal is different to Bordeaux. The oak usage, which is 100% brand new American oak, which we use, is different. And obviously the fact that we source from different regions within South Australia to suit the style. These are all anomalies that happened because he had to work with what he had in 1950.
Yeah.
Well, 1951, I should say, in Australia.
And this is a blend Cab Shiraz as well?
Yeah, you couldn't call it a Cab Shiraz because it is Shiraz.
Shiraz
You're
mostly.
looking at about, in any given vintage, 97, 98%
Okay, mostly
Shiraz.
Shiraz. Okay, yeah.
Just a small amount of Cabernet. Small amount. 100% brand new American oak, but what
Yeah,
you're
this is
looking at
amazing. I mean,
is
the freshness.
is a representation. What Max wanted to make, and I'll say this very quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time.
I got one more question and then we're done.
Perfect. So Max wanted to come back to Australia, and he wanted to make an Australian table wine comparable to those of Europe and capable of staying alive for 20 years. Bearing in mind, up until the 1950s, we were making sweet wines, so fortified wines, etc.
Yeah,
So this was a very, very, very new style of wine for Australia at the time. And I think those anomalies of the different varietal oak regional sourcing that Grange ended up being, because of the fact that Max had to work with what he had, ended up giving him exactly that. This is a wine that has been proven to sell over 60 years.
It lasts forever. I've had this wine from 30 years ago, and they're so tight, and they, you can have a Grange that's 20 years old, and it feels like a 2-year-old wine.
It's
Yeah.
exactly.
Stays fresh.
It is a wine that does exactly what he wanted.
Yeah.
It is comparable
Yeah.
to those of
It
Europe
lasts
from
a lifetime.
from an Australian standpoint. He produced exactly what he wanted to, which is a Shiraz. South Australia is known for Shiraz. It is comparable to those of Europe. It is capable of staying alive for 20,
Well,
30,
he achieved
40 years.
he achieved this goal. This wine is made
He
for
did.
eternity. It's made
Absolutely.
to. Last question before we wrap up.
Yes.
This is your first time in Puerto Rico. You told
It
me off
is.
camera. You've
Yes.
only been on the island for 36 hours, you said?
Yeah, thereabouts.
What do you make of it?
I love it. I grew up in tropical weather.
Okay.
So I grew up. I was born in Adelaide, where our winery sits.
Okay.
But I grew up in.
So instead of milk, you had wine as a baby. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe, I'm not sure what my
Okay.
parents fed
Yeah.
me. No, I grew up in Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
So just at the top of Australia, but I grew up in tropical weather. So whenever I come to a market that has beautiful
sort of characteristic.
this characteristic and this lifestyle of, it's very laid back, everyone's
Yeah.
friendly, everyone
is.
just
It
wants
is
to
a
have a good
beautiful-
time. I feel at home. So
And before we wrap up, Orrio de Suarez, you are in the best of hands. They do a marvelous job in selling and promoting Penfolds, that's for sure. You're with one of the big ones. And I hope this is the first of many visits to the island.
so
Let's
do
toast
I.
with a grain.
Yes.
Little bit. Amigos,
you.
salud, gracias por seguirnos. Agradezco a los amigos y a la familia de B. Suárez, a todo el equipo de ventas, a Arnaldi y a todas las personas que siempre cuentan con Wine News TV para comunicar y hablar de la cultura del vino. Será hasta la próxima. Recuerden suscribirse al canal. I'm telling them to subscribe to the channel. You
Absolutely.
say you wanted to tell your mom you love her. Go
I
ahead.
do.
Go.
Hi, Mom. I love you.
All right.
From
Salud.
Puerto Rico.
Mom, cheers from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Hope you visit us soon. Cheers.
Cheers.